Okay, welcome to video number 32 of the Diaries of a Coronavirologist YouTube channel. Today is the 12th of August and we have passed 20 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world, and that's been responsible for a little bit over 745,000 confirmed deaths. So today I'm going to be talking about face masks. Don't worry, I won't wear it for the whole video. So firstly, before I go into the study I want to talk about, which has been making the news this week and it's quite a cool little study, I just want to say face masks work. Wear a face mask when you're in enclosed spaces with people you don't regularly spend time with. Wear a face mask when you're around people. They protect you and they protect others. But this doesn't mean you need to always be wearing a face mask. So for example, when I cycle to work, I don't wear a face mask. I'm outdoors, I'm not nowhere near anyone for any kind of extended period of time, and therefore it's not necessary that I wear a mask. When I get to work and when I'm moving around work, I'm wearing a face mask. But when I'm just sat at my desk, more than 6 feet, probably up to 10 feet away from anyone, I don't wear a mask during that. It's only when I move around and could become close to people that I put one on. And this is because the virus doesn't seem, or I've not seen any compelling data that says this virus is truly airborne. And what this means in the context of viral transmission is that the virus doesn't hang around in the air. So there are viruses that are small and get expelled and stay in the air, so measles, for example. But I'm yet to see any compelling evidence that suggests that coronaviruses are this truly airborne thing. So me just breathing out air into a room is not going to stay suspended in the air for any extended period of time. The best data that I'm seeing suggests that the virus is spread by respiratory droplets. So they're the things that you expel when you talk, when you cough, when you sneeze. And this is why the distance of 6 foot or greater is important, because that's about how far droplets can travel when you're talking. Face masks are great at stopping the transmission of those droplets, and that's what the study that I'm going to be talking about today was looking at. So the work was done by researchers at Duke University in North Carolina, and they used a very low-cost system to look at the expulsion of respiratory droplets when a subject was talking and how different types of mask impacted that. They tested 14 different varieties of mask, and I'll link down to the paper like always so you can go and look at all of them, but they ranged from the N95 masks, the ones that fit really tightly and are really super effective at blocking transmission of respiratory droplets because they're designed to do that. They looked at the surgical masks that people wear as well and to compare those, and then worked their way down to different varieties such as the cloth face masks and so on and so forth. Like I said, there were 14 different ones, and they also did things like bandanas and neck gaiters as well as the actual designed masks that strap around the ears. So the low-cost system to look at the expulsion of respiratory droplets, which I think is great, entailed a box that people speak into, a laser that you can buy for around $100 to $200, and a phone camera. So in this case, they used a Samsung Galaxy S9, for anyone that was wondering, because I wasn't. I had to look it up in the materials and methods. So they have someone speaking into a box. They shine a laser into that dark enclosed space, and then at the other side, they have a camera. And they look for how the laser light is scattered by the respiratory droplets. So I'm sure people have seen in rooms where light is streaming in through windows, how dust floats in the air. You may even see occasionally you expel respiratory droplets when spit comes out when you're talking. That's essentially all this system's doing. It's looking at how the light from the laser is scattered when people speak it, or a person speaks into this box. Then the person puts on 14 different varieties of mask, and the camera and some computer algorithms can monitor the change in the respiratory droplets. So how many droplets there are, how long they're in the air for, and how large they are. So they had their participant, and for the most part, it was one person speaking. There were a couple of masks they tried with 4 different speakers, but for the most part, one person put their face up against the box, stay there for 10 seconds breathing to get a baseline level of the expulsion of respiratory droplets. Then say 5 times, stay healthy people. So that took about another 10 seconds. And then they'd stay recording for another 20 seconds to see how the droplets stayed in the air. So all in all, it took about 40 seconds, and the phrase was "stay healthy, people." Now, this was repeated 10 times for each of the 14 masks, so some poor test subject had to say "stay healthy, people" a smooth 700 times, which I'm sure was fun. But this gave them data to see how different types of mask impact the release of respiratory droplets. And coming as no surprise, the N95 masks, which are fitted and designed to block the release of any kind of air and respiratory droplets, were the best. There were no respiratory droplets released. Coming in second were the surgical masks, which again are designed to stop the spread of respiratory droplets, and they were designed to stop the spread of infection when surgeries were being performed and things like this. And then, again, it's all in the paper. I won't list off all the different materials, but going through, basically the thicker materials were better, the more layers there were of the cotton or different types of material for the masks, they were better. Bandanas were largely useless. They didn't have much impact, a small reduction, but not great. And one thing that sort of caught some headlines this week was that the neck gaiters, the fleece neck gaiters, so the sort of the ones that go around your neck and you can pull up over your nose, which I have to admit I had been wearing until I saw this paper, they actually seem to increase the respiratory droplet release. So there was a 10% increase. So instead of the 100% baseline that was no mask, the fleece neck gaiter seemed to go up to about 110% release. Now, the argument that's put forward for why this might be is that the material in the fleece neck gaiter might help to break up some of the larger droplets that would be expelled. And then those smaller droplets that are broken out into can stay in the air for longer. So it could be the case that neck gaiters actually increase the amount of small respiratory droplets, which then come out and are being picked up in their system, whereas the large droplets would just come out and fall quicker and not be detected by their setup of the laser beam and the phone. So this is a nice little system to look at how masks impact respiratory droplets. And there's no surprise, the better quality the mask is, the better reduction in respiratory droplet release there is. Now, there's important caveats, and the authors go into great detail on these in the discussion in the paper. So, for an example, they mostly only look at one person, and different people talk in different ways. They talk at different volumes, they talk with different dialects, they talk with different languages, and all of this can impact the release of respiratory droplets. You probably wouldn't expect, though, that the masks are going to be overly impacted by the different type of speak. But maybe, for example, softer speakers wouldn't see that increase that was seen in the fleece neck gaiters, perhaps, because if you talk louder, you're more likely, presumably, to expel larger droplets, and then you get this breakup effect that they were suggesting, just ideas. But for a small little proof of concept, it's great. They also point out that they're just using low-cost system. It's a Samsung Galaxy S9 that someone normally just carries around in their pocket, and a cheap laser beam and a box. With better cameras, with higher quality lasers, they could probably get even better data from this, and I'm sure that will be future work. Now, the other important caveat with all of this is this isn't looking at virus at all. They could write this whole paper in and not even mention SARS-2 and COVID-19. All they're looking at is respiratory droplets. So there's nothing in this paper that says that infection is increased or infection is stopped by these masks. So neck gaiters don't increase infection. I've seen some of those headlines. They maybe increase respiratory droplet release. So the cool studies and research that will come later, and I'm sure is going on in places, is to actually look at how much virus gets released when people speak, although it's obviously a lot harder to do that kind of research. It's a lot more technically challenging, and you need a lot more specialized equipment. So just as a proof of principle, this is a nice study. It shows that masks reduce the release of respiratory droplets, and respiratory droplets are how this virus spreads. They don't directly show that the masks reduce infection. There's other studies that show that masks do work. I'll link to 2 of those studies down in the description to this if people want to go and read further about the fact that masks actually do provide protection and reduce the spread of SARS-2. But in this work, it's just looking at how the masks impact respiratory droplet release. And that's all I'm going to say about face masks and respiratory droplet transmission. If you've got the timestamp up there, you'll see that there's still a few minutes of this video left because I'm bringing in some questions from my previous video. So in my last video, I was talking about the Novavax vaccine and some promising data that came from its phase one, or that was coming out from its phase one trial. So I've got 3 questions that were posted on that video, all largely regarding vaccines. So the first of these came from someone whose name is written in Cyrillic, and I'm not even going to pretend I have an idea how to say it. But it asked me to comment on the vaccine that's coming out of Russia. So again, another thing that's been making the news this week is that Russia have licensed the first COVID-19 SARS-2 vaccine. It's nicknamed Sputnik 5. Its more formal name, I guess, is GAM COVID Vac. My comment is that I can't make one because there's no data. There's no published data on the effectiveness of this vaccine. There's no data on how many people it's been trialed in. All that there is hearsay that it's worked and that Russia have now licensed it. They haven't done their phase 3 trial. They've supposedly done a phase 1 and a phase 2. They haven't done a phase 3. As a reminder, there's, I think, 4 different vaccines, maybe 5, that are in phase 3 trials around the world. I've, on this channel, talked about Moderna's mRNA vaccine that's being backed by the NIH, and Oxford University's ChAdOx vaccine in the UK. Both of those are in their phase 3 trials. So my comment is, I want to see the data. I feel that this is being rushed. I think that's risky. What I've worked out is that it's an adenovirus-based system, so it's a similar strategy to what's being used by the University of Oxford for their ChAdOx vaccine, although it uses 2 human adenoviruses as the vector. And this is something that's being looked at for flu, for example, as well. So it's technology that's out there and it's being researched, but there's no data about this vaccine, and I can't comment any further beyond the fact that I think things are being rushed and we need better data before vaccines are licensed. There's risks that are being taken without doing the proper safety and efficacy testing. So the next question up that I thought I'd discuss today came from Vicky, which was, if a vaccine that's effective but not brilliantly so becomes available and someone has it, could the same person have another vaccine should a more effective one come along? So I thought this was a great question because I don't actually have a great answer to it. I don't think it's something that's ever really been looked at or thought about in particularly large detail because we've never really been in a situation where there's so many different vaccine candidates and so much research going into producing vaccines and in such a short period of time. My thought would be that since you can be infected with coronaviruses, say the seasonal viruses, and then your immunity wanes over a year or so and you can become reinfected. If we get a vaccine that produces immunity that lasts for a year or so and then it wanes, then you can go and get another vaccine. Booster vaccines and things like this are used. So immunity wanes and you can get revaccinated. And I can't imagine there would be problems with the second vaccine being protective, but I think it's something that would need to be researched to make sure it's safe. The vaccine 1 and vaccine 2 could interact. Vaccine 1 could block the efficacy of vaccine 2, things like this. So I think it's a great question. I think it's something that would need to be thought about, and I don't have a solid answer for what the case is going to be. I think anything that does go through all the appropriate phase 3 trials, is shown to be safe, shown to be protective, is going to be good enough and therefore should be used. And maybe better vaccines will be developed, but as long as the ones we get are protective, then this is the most important thing. Okay, and finally from Emma on vaccines again. Corona vaccines don't work. I've taken out a little bit here. Existing flu vaccines do not guarantee that they prevent the infection of a flu virus, as you are aware. Why is this vaccine different? So firstly, we don't know coronavirus vaccines don't work because we've never made one that's gone all the way to where we're at now. The vaccines that are being produced for SARS-2 are the furthest along coronavirus vaccines we've ever had. There's never been such a push to make a coronavirus vaccine. So there's no way to say that they don't work. And so far, data are promising. We've got various ones that are in phase 3 trials. We supposedly have a licensed one now, as per a previous comment. As for why flu vaccines are required every year and why sometimes maybe they're not 100% effective, flu vaccination needs to work on a somewhat predictive system. So every year we get flu season in the winter months. Vaccines need to be produced. This takes time. They need to be administered. This takes time. So throughout the summer months, looking at the data in the southern hemisphere, so I'm speaking for the northern hemisphere, people are looking at what flu viruses are spreading, and that's being used to predict what flu viruses may spread in the northern hemisphere, and that's how we then put the certain strains of the virus into the vaccine. However, the virus is constantly mutating, it's constantly changing, and it can therefore mutate away from the strain that goes into the vaccine, therefore lowering the efficacy of the vaccine. The researchers that decide and predict what to put into the vaccine are great. They do an amazing job. But the virus is pesky, it mutates, it changes, and we can't predict how it's going to change. So this is why flu vaccination sometimes isn't super effective. The difference is, though, coronaviruses don't mutate anywhere near as rapidly as flu, and I've talked about this on previous videos, so I won't go into it in too much detail. But coronaviruses are much more genetically stable. So a big hope with producing coronavirus vaccines is that they won't need to be taken every year like the flu vaccine. And this largely comes down to the fact that they aren't as mutable. They don't change as rapidly, they don't change as much. So in principle, if we can make a very good vaccine, then it may be good for life. Take, for example, the measles vaccine. This is good for life because it targets a part of the virus that barely changes, and that's why you can be vaccinated and safe from measles for your whole life and not get measles and not die. So that's the hope with coronaviruses and why we think that coronavirus vaccines will work and why so much effort is being put into producing them for the SARS-2 virus. And that's where I'll leave things for tonight. So if you've got questions and comments, please leave them down in the description below. I'm going to try and keep incorporating questions into the videos. So if you've got things about what I've talked about in the video, or if you've got more general questions, please feel free to add them. I want this channel to be a source of useful and interesting information about what's going on. And if you're finding the channel useful and interesting, please remember to drop a like and hit the subscribe button. Turn on the notifications so you find out when I put up new videos, or alternatively, follow me on Twitter. I put my handle down in the description for each of these videos, and I always post when I've got a new one. And please share with other people. As always, please stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and keep calm and carry on. We will get through this pandemic.